Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us again for the last webinar in this three-part series, the Business Growth and Exit series. As you can see on the screen, today we are going to talk about how to prepare your business for sale. So this is a really one of my favorite topics. Look, it really does sort of round out the three-part series because it helps you really get your head into the space of, well, what actually do I need to do? Like, how does this work? How do I really get organized? And we're going to really take this from two perspectives today. It's going to be a two-part. One, how do you prepare yourself? But also, how do you then start to prepare your business? And ultimately, what will be the campaign for you to sell your company? So we do have a couple of people still joining at the moment. I'm going to only give them a quick minute before we keep kicking on. But just while we're waiting for them, I would just like to say, if you are getting some value out of these sessions, we are going to be running another webinar in a couple of weeks' time, which is going to focus on how to sell your business. So in other words, the actual process, but how to sell your business without a broker. May sound a little counterintuitive. We sell businesses for a living. So disclaimer here, Exit Advisory Group does actually manage transactions for people. But what I find is that there's a lot of business owners out there who are actually wondering how to go about this. Maybe they've actually had bad experiences with brokers and advisors too, and maybe they're just confident that they can deliver it themselves. So it's something that I see a little bit of out there. And so really, we want to show you that if you're going to go down that path, there is actually some methods, tools, tips, things you can use to make it easier. So it's not part of this three-part series. It's actually going to be an additional new webinar. So you will need to re-register for that new webinar, but we'll be sending you some emails about this in the coming week or so, just to let you know how to go about doing that. So stay tuned. Next webinar, how to sell your business without a broker. And that would certainly dovetail finally on the end of today's session, which will be how to prepare your business for sale. All right, so I'm going to kick on and let's start off. Now, I do have a few slides today. As you can see, I am not a massive fan of death by PowerPoint, so I may will jump in and out of things as we go. So bear with me. What I have done, just as we're kicking off too, we did receive a lot of questions again. Thank you for your participation and for sending those through. What I've done is I've really kind of just structured today's presentation to answer those questions. Now, if for some reason I don't answer your question today, or if I've created new questions for you today that don't get resolved, please reach out. I'm going to show you a slide at the end so you can, it's really easy to make contact with us, but you can book a call, connect with me on LinkedIn if you haven't already, ping me a message, let me know that you just saw the webinar and you have some questions. We can make time to jump on a call. Failing that, look, obviously we'll be in touch via email, so you can always respond to that. All righty, good stuff. So in the interest of time, let's kick off. The two parts of today's session is really going to start with, the first part is about establishing an exit plan for yourself. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, hang on a minute, this is about preparing your business for sale. Well, yes, it is. But like any real process in business or in life, if you don't go into that process with a well-defined plan of what you're trying to achieve, then it's likely you're going to end up in the wrong place, be very disappointed, and probably have wasted a lot of time and money along the way. So my goal here is to give you what you need so that you can navigate this path in the shortest period of time and avoid the most common mistakes and most obvious pitfalls that are going to, trip you up and cause grief. So it does start with having a bit of an exit plan. Now, what do I mean by having an exit plan? Because it's one of those terms that I find it's almost a little bit generic, and everybody sort of says to me like, well, what does that actually mean? So what I've tried to do, and I think a picture is worth 1,000 words here, I've tried to break down, or I'm showing you how we define exit plans with our clients. And this should be enough to get you started. Once again, reach out if you've got more detailed questions. But what you're seeing on the screen at the moment are really what I see as the 5 big buckets of exit planning, okay? I'm going to start with financial needs there on the left. You know, money is always going to be important in these things, right? In business and in life and in this journey, and particularly when you think of selling your business. But if you've been on these previous webinars with us, you will have heard me already say this, but money is really important, but only to a point. Once you know you're actually getting enough money, or the money side of things is being satisfied, typically other aspects tend to rise to the top of the priority list. So when you're thinking about money, one of the things I would want you to ask yourself is whether or not you need the money from this sale to be able to move on to the next stage of your life. When I say next stage, could that be retirement? Absolutely. Maybe you're actually just done with this business and you want to move on and go do something else. You know, do you need the capital from this business to go and invest in another business? Do you want to, I had a client just the other day, basically wants to sell up and he just wants to go and do a bit of project development, you know, do a bit of building, develop his own sites, have some fun doing it. So very much needed the capital to go and reinvest somewhere else. So it wasn't even a business as such, more of a hobby that he planned to make money out of. So do you need this money? And I say that because there's a couple of parts to this. One, if you actually don't need the money from this business, if you're already independently wealthy, then you actually have choices here, right? You may actually not want to sell the business. This idea of holding on to the business as an asset is potentially available to you. Now, having said that, today is all about how to prepare for sale. So we're going to assume that most people on this call are looking to ultimately sell and ultimately looking to extract the value that is in that business. So if you do need that capital, you need to start asking yourself, well, what number do I need or want from this sale? Okay, so the actual number, of course, and I'm going to go back to what I said in some of the previous webinars too. I always think there's 2 numbers around the sale of your business or the value of your business. It's what is the business worth to you? And also what is the business actually worth to the market? All right, we've all heard the expression, your business is only worth what the market's willing to pay. And that's true fundamentally, but clearly what it's worth in the market will change from time to time. I believe it was Greg Alexander was one of the guests on the Buy, Grow, Sell podcast. I love quoting him because he just has such an amazing story. But he sold his professional services company. It had about a $30 million turnover for a $16 million EBIT, believe it or not. I mean, a massive number. Sold it for $162 million. Wonderful transaction. But he always says, look, those 2 numbers, you know, what it's worth to you and what it's worth to your business. And if your business is ever worth more to the market than it is to you, it's probably time to sell because, you know, you're going to capitalize on the maximum value for your business. And frankly, that dynamic between those 2 numbers can change in a heartbeat. So if you ever find yourself in that situation where the market's willing to pay over what you want, probably a good time to grab it. Now, I will talk later, I'll touch a little bit on buyers and how to engage that because I think there's a little trap there for business owners where somebody, you know, comes and taps you on the shoulder and says, hey, we want to buy your business and we think it's worth X. You get very, very excited and you end up going down the rabbit hole with that one buyer, and that often ends in tears for business owners. So make sure if you're going to bother selling, you need multiple parties in the game. You need to be having a process and a bit of a strategy about how you go about doing that. And we're going to touch a bit more on that in a moment. So what is your business worth? What do you need it to be worth? If you are thinking of retiring here, please don't just kind of do a bit of mental arithmetic or, you know, back of the envelope stuff. And what I mean by that is, oh, geez, you know, I reckon, you know, $2 million would be enough. Yeah, if I could get 2 million, that'd be pretty good. Like, if that's the depth of your analysis around the amount of money you need for the next phase of your life, you're probably setting yourself up for failure or hardship. At the risk of sounding obvious here, I would suggest what you need to do is do a bit of a budget, a home budget, a life budget, right? How much money do you need to live on? What are your expenses? What are your outgoings? What sort of expenses might be coming up? I'll use myself as the example here. I've got 2 kids in high school. At the moment, I'm paying school fees. There's a possibility that one or both of those boys might want to go on to university. So there could be additional expenses that I want to support them with in maybe 5 or 6 years' time. So for me, I can do a budget today to say, well, what is my revenue and what are my expenses and how much money do I actually need to live on or live the life I want? But I do need to start projecting forward and saying, well, how much money am I going to need in future years? And will there be spikes in terms of investment capital, expense requirements, that sort of stuff that I need to factor into my thinking if I was to sell my business today? So that's the sort of thinking and the science that I would want you to put behind whatever number you believe you need, okay? By the way, if you want a template for this all comes in under exit planning stuff, like reach out. We can help you with something, point you in the right direction at the very least. That's the numbers. That's the valuation. That's the financial side of it in a nutshell anyway. Clearly, there's going to be more to it if you want to dig into it. The second thing on this is timing, okay? Now, I know we talked about timing a little bit in the past, but timing in its purest form is, how long do you want to keep doing what you're doing? And I mean that from a time perspective, as in how you're spending your time on a day-to-day basis. Do you actually enjoy what you're doing? So what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, and then also, of course, how long do you want to keep owning this asset? Now, I know I've spoken on the previous webinars about broader investment theory, and I'm going to throw my disclaimer out here saying, clearly I'm not here giving financial advice to anybody. This is very general in nature. But how long you want to own that asset is important, because if that asset represents 50% of your wealth, and you're going to step out of the day-to-day of that business, well, you've got other risks that you probably need to consider and probably should get some financial advice around. But talking of timing and when you might want to sell your business is probably a really good segue for us. I actually might just stop sharing just for a moment, and I'm going to jump into our very first poll for the day. That is hopefully popping up on your screen. By the way, one little thing, if you find some of the questions might look a bit squished up, so you might need to just widen the little pop-up window for you for the questions if you can't read it all. But are you considering selling your business in the next 12 months, the next 1 to 2 years, or the next 3 to 5 years? Clearly, look, if you're longer out than that, look, no trouble. Put maybe 3 to 5 years. If that's a concern, it is a bit of a longer term cycle there. A lot can happen in 3 to 5 years, including the implementation of new strategies and execution on those kind of moves. We're getting some good answers coming through there. About 20% of people are in the next 12 months. Another 25% are in the next 1 to 2 years. So good news, for all of you, regardless of your timeline, you're in the right place, because I'm going to talk about stuff that is going to be relevant to you. So I'll leave that open just for a couple more minutes. Just while we're chatting through this timing aspect. And then I'll share my screen again just so you can see those other 5 aspects. So timing is a really important one. One of the things that you really need to consider when you're answering the question of how long do I want to keep doing this is not just how long you want to keep working, but considering how long it will take to actually run a sale process. And also terms around that deal might require you to hang around in the business after you've sold it. So if we start with the end in mind, as we always advocate for, let's say you actually want to stop working at a certain point in time, you need to consider, well, what if the buyer wants me to hang around for a year or possibly 2 years? That's got you working for all of that period there. You need to allow up to 12 months for the transaction to go through. To be frank, I've had transactions that have taken 18 months. I've had transactions that have gone in 3 or 4 months. I always say to our clients, allow in your own mind that it will take probably around 12 months. That way, if you get it done in 7 or 8 or 9 months, happy days. You've sort of under-promised to yourself and over-delivered, so that'll be a good outcome. But at least if it does take 12 months, you're less likely to be stressed out by that situation. So it seems, I think everybody's answered that poll now. So a good percentage of people there, about 64% of people are actually in the 3 to 5 or longer period. So that's cool. We'll talk a little bit more, some of the more higher level aspects for you in terms of getting your business organized, which I'll be talking about shortly, is going to probably be more of interest to you, whereas some of the more prep stuff will be very, very important for people wanting to sell in the next couple of years. So I'll just end that poll now. Thanks for bearing with me on that. And now I'll just go back to sharing my screen so you can see those 5 things. Excuse me. So just in terms of that timing, make sure that you allow enough time to do any kind of workout period that's part of your deal, 12 months to run the transaction. And of course, if you need to do any kind of prep phasing, rebuilding, restructuring, new strategies, etc., give yourself enough time to implement those. So if any of you are sitting on this call and said, well, Simon, I really have got a lot of growth ahead of me before I'll be in any position to sell, I would say, if you want to implement a new strategy, you need a good 3 years to actually implement it, execute, or come up with a strategy, implement, execute, sort of see it bedded down and start to see the return on investment of that new strategy, and have some track record before you start going into a business sale process. Because, I get business owners all the time who they've got a brand new business. They've started 12 months ago and they had a good year, and then they suddenly want to sell it thinking they're going to get a big multiple. Like, buyers aren't silly, right? They're going to look at that and say, that's so risky. Like, we don't know whether that's repeatable. Same thing with a new strategy. Having a year or 2 of operating under that new strategy and showing results and hopefully a good trend line will give you a good platform to be able to project the future potential results of your business, and obviously give some buyers confidence that that is likely to occur. I was chatting to a client just yesterday who told me he wanted to get out in 3 years' time. I said to him, well, look, to be frank, we need to start the process now. Because even if we started literally a campaign tomorrow, the prep phase, et cetera, need to allow 12 months. Then there's going to be a period there where he, being a professional services company, I told him he needs to allow at least a minimum of 12 months still working in the business, but more likely 2 years to do that proper handover. Okay, so timing, it's an interesting beast, but it's a really important one. And as you've probably figured already, timing and valuation are literally hand in glove here, right? If your business is already worth what you want it to be worth, or you're happy with the number, well, great. You could pull the trigger on a campaign and exit fairly quickly. If you don't want to exit yet, well, you can keep working the business and potentially growing it a bit further, but you've already got that valuation metric ticked off. So you've got more control over timing. If you're on the other side of that ledger where the valuation does not meet your needs, well, then I think really it's important to define what those needs are, as we were talking before, and then come up with a realistic plan on how long you believe it'll take you to get there. Okay, so valuation and timing, almost flip sides of the same coin because they're so integrated, okay? Once you've taken care of those things, the third thing on my list is legacy. Legacy is a bit of a catch-all phrase because to me, it's kind of, how do people talk about you when you've left the room, right? How do you leave people feeling? One of my dear friends and a bit of a mentor to me always said, people will never remember what you said, but they'll always remember the way you made them feel. And I'm a massive believer in that expression because, it's so deep and intrinsic for people. And I think when you leave the room, how will your employees feel about you? How will they feel about your contribution to the world, to the business, to their lives? Will suppliers and customers, I don't know how entrenched or how deep your relationships are with those people, but maybe they're not deep, maybe they're not entrenched. And frankly, if you have a great profitable business without those kind of hooks in you, it's probably easier to sell anyway. But if you do have those relationships, quite often those relationships are going to come into your thinking at some point in this prep phase. Okay, now I strongly suggest you have a think about those things well before you're in a campaign, because I've had clients going through a due diligence process who've suddenly had this crisis of conscience and really freaked out about particular relationships, both employees and in the case I'm thinking of, it was customers as well. It's not the time to be thinking about that. The time to be thinking about it is well in advance when you're not under pressure and you can actually consider in a very strategic way how you'll manage that. And by the way, don't look for perfection in these things, right? You're never going to please everybody all the time. And if you try to, you're just going to fail and be disappointed. So really, you need to think about what is the right solution that's going to give you, on the weight of things, the best outcome, okay? So valuation, timing, legacy, all of those factors are going to play into ultimately what are your exit options and the terms available to you, okay? When I say exit options, look, obviously there are exit options outside of selling your business, but in this case, I'm referring more to what might look like the terms of your deal, okay? Excuse me. Let me give you an example of terms. You can get your money, and apologies if you've heard this from the previous webinars, but it's worth repeating. You could get when you sell your business, the money that you get paid can be paid in a number of buckets. It could be cash up front. It could be cash that's deferred but not at risk. So in other words, it could just be annual payments for the next year, 2 years, 3 years, etc. There is deferred but at risk. That's your classic earnout that I'm sure everybody's heard of before. In other words, you need to hit certain KPIs to be paid any of that money, part of that money, or all of that money. It is worth mentioning here that there is 1,000 different ways to slice and dice not only the structure of these deals, but even an earnout. So your situation will be different to other people, potentially even other people in your industry. So it may be worth exploring that and getting a little bit of advice around that. The fourth bucket is actually taking shares in another company. Look, that's great if you're a founder-led business and you're selling to a big listed entity and you plan to hang around for a very long time and you want to grow the business to the next stage. Wonderful. Often you get, certainly if you're selling to a listed company, they may offer you equity in their own business. Does happen in the private space as well, but just a little bit less often. So they're the sort of four buckets, and how you get paid your money, what sort of timing that money gets paid to you, and the terms and conditions around that all plays into ultimately what are the terms of the deal, but as you can see, are touching on those key issues that we've already spoken about. The final and the fifth and final factor around your exit plan there is your personal exit readiness or risk factors. Now, to this, I would say the budgeting aspect I talked about before is part of your personal financial planning. I'm going to touch on you on this quickly because there's an enormous amount you can cover off in personal exit readiness, but you need to understand your financial situation. You need to understand risk factors like insurance, estate planning, all the things about where does your money go and how do you manage it. So there's that whole sort of monetary risk side of your life. The counter to that is your sense of purpose. I've spoken a lot on our podcast and even perhaps mentioned in these webinar series about different examples of people that I see who sell their business or even quit their job and don't know what they're going to do next. To be honest, some people manage that ambiguity quite well. Other people end up quite depressed and unhappy. So having thought around what am I going to do when I actually exit this business or when I stop working in this business is really important. Don't wait until you're in the moment to start doing that. And I'll give you an example. My father-in-law, bless him, I love him to death. He's a great example because he's a doctor, he's a GP, and that's all he's done all his life. And I keep talking to him about retiring and saying, well, what's your plan after this? What are you going to do? Because you can only kind of do gardening and watch a few movies for so long before you'll be bored. And after that, you need somewhere productive and positive to put your energy. So think of all the risk management and financial aspects to your life. Think about the deeper, intrinsic, more purpose sides of your life. And look, frankly, we've got checklists and things we can help you with. So, and there's a lot to consider. So go through a process and make sure that you're clear on, even if you're not clear on every single answer, you've given thought to some of the issues that may impact your life. Okay, moving on. The next aspect to preparing your business for sale is really defining, it's getting your actual business ready for sale. So we've talked about getting yourself ready for sale. Now we want to get your business ready for sale. And to do that, the first thing in my mind you need to do is actually define what your business is, okay? And I always find, and bear with me here, having a bit of a laugh, but, you know, any of you involved, I'm showing my age here, but Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, you know, with all these wonderful moving machines that do all these kind of really cool things. Like, I always liken this to, how hard is it for you to explain your business? How hard is it to explain what you do? How hard is it for you to explain how you make money? And I'm not just talking about, hey, people come to us because they like our staff and we sell and we make money. Like, if you can't define it very, very specifically, you're going to struggle to give confidence to potential buyers. Now, this, by the way, applies whether you're selling $1 million business, your business is worth a couple of $100,000, or it's worth a couple of $100 million, right? Yeah, the principles of what we're talking about today are the same regardless of size, regardless of industry. The only difference is the bigger you are, the more sort of layers of complexity and sort of hierarchical stuff you'll have under the surface. So how hard is your business is your business hard to understand, or is your business a profit machine? Now, is it a quirky machine that goes bing and makes noise, or is it something that just runs like a well-oiled machine? Is it a Formula One car? And to that end, I'm sharing with you just a basic model here. You know, it looks pretty ugly, really, all these shapes, but I'm sure it will tell the story for you in terms of certainly how I would look at your business, certainly how I'd look at your business if I was representing a buyer, and certainly how I'd engage with you if we were trying to sell your business for you. You may recognize some of these steps because we touched on it in one of the previous webinars around instead of having an org chart, having a process chart. You know, if your number one goal is to make a profit, and by the way, fundamentally, that's what buyers want, right? They're buying your future stream of profit, not necessarily all the stories and the trophies or the, you know, awards you might have won. It's how much profit does it make and how much more profit can it make in the future when we own it. So I want you to think about your business from a top down, think of it, and also left to right. Two biggest buckets, right? First thing you need to do is generate revenue, and then you need to deliver value to customers somewhere, people who are willing to pay you for something, whether it's a product, a service, a productized service, a combination of the two, whatever it might be. You need to find potential customers, which is your marketing, which is layer 2 now. You need to sell to them, right? You need to have some process for doing that, whether it's an online automated sales process or you have salespeople or whatever that might look like for you in your world. You then need to create and deliver the value that you promised, right? And let's be honest, there's a lot of businesses who fail in that alone. So of course, if you deliver value well, then it comes back into that feedback loop of, well, how do you maintain customer service? How do you maintain customer satisfaction, client retention, and feed that right back into the marketing loop? Okay, now this area here is one of the key areas that I find most businesses fail in that they can't clearly define how they actually go about generating revenue and closing it out, delivering value, and creating a value loop. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, you may be saying at the moment, well, I have an architecture firm, or I have some other firm. We get a lot of referrals. It's quite simple. They come in, we have a chat, we offer them stuff. It closes. You need to be able to describe things in more detail than that. You also need to show that there's more thinking and systemization around it. Some of the best businesses I've ever seen are both SaaS companies and e-commerce businesses. Now, they have access to the data and they have the systems and the technology to support their processes. So they can literally tell you, these are the 5 channels where we find leads. This is our cost of, a customer acquisition cost, so your CAC. So this is how much it costs for us to find and acquire a new lead, and then also bring them through a sale process, total cost of acquisition, total customer lifetime value is what it's worth to us. Here's our churn rates in terms of when customers fall out and what it costs to replace them at that point. Now, those kind of metrics give an enormous amount of confidence to buyers. right? Because they can actually see that everything's measured, therefore it can be managed. And typically in those businesses, they're able to say, hey, if we turn this tap here and put more in at the top of the funnel, we know quite consistently and because we track the numbers, how well we'll convert through this process and how many new clients spit out the other end. Okay. Now, if you aren't able to articulate some kind of system like that in your business, then it's going to cost you. It's going to cost you both in potentially the value of your business. And in some cases, if you've got, your business is quite small or it's undefined, you may not even be able to sell it, right? Buyers just aren't interested in buying you and being reliant on you to continue to deliver, the value that your business currently delivers. So now, of course, part of those rows down there you can see is I do touch on systems, processes, and data. If you don't have a really good CRM system that tracks all of your customers and where they're at in your particular journey, then that's a problem. If you can't define your marketing channels and how they'll fit into that system and you're tracking all those leads and you've got the conversion metrics, that's a problem. So getting the right CRM and marketing platforms for you it's an enormous asset when it comes to both running your business and growing your business and ultimately selling your business. Okay. I'm going to just quickly touch on that operating model and cadence. What do I mean by that? Your operating model, to me, is how you bring together a lot of the people and your particular model and how it works on a day-to-day basis. I start with that sort of stuff, and we touched on this in the previous webinars, but start with your vision framework. Like, what is your purpose? Why does your company exist? What are your long-term goals? What are your 3 to 5 year goals? What is your annual plan or your annual objectives? Have you broken those down into 90-day action plans? Do you review those 90 actions? Do you review your performance monthly? And do you have weekly team meetings? Now, if you're in a small company of 2, 3 people, something like that, this is going to be you'd have a simplified version of this, right? But if you've got 10 staff, 20 staff, 100 staff, these plans become critical. And the weekly cadence of meetings and what you're trying to get out of those meetings and how you drive accountability through your organization is going to be absolutely critical. Okay. So how you manage people, how you manage issues that arise in your business, right? That all of this stuff feeds into what is basically your model and what your cadence or the rhythm of your operations are. Now, the more practiced you are at that, and the more consistently you apply your model, first of all, you're going to run a better business, 100%. Number 2, you're going to be able to really articulate that and why it provides a competitive advantage to your business over perhaps other companies. It inspires, to see that sort of model inspires a lot of confidence in buyers. And so once again, if you reduce the risk in your business by demonstrating you've got models and you've got practices and entrenched culture and process, it reduces the risk of your business having issues in the future, and therefore, potentially, it increases the value to that buyer. Systems, process, and data. Now, I've touched a little bit on that in terms of CRMs, marketing systems. If you are a business that delivers projects, how do you manage those projects? Do you have a project management software that you use? Does it fit into your accounting software? How do your different systems talk to each other? Do you have automations? Who are the systems experts in your business that just know how everything runs? And are there backups to those people in case one of them wins 100 million lotto tomorrow and disappears to the Bahamas? So systems, processes, data, what you're capturing, how you capture it, what the metrics actually say about your business, and ultimately the value of that company. Excuse me. Of course, we've touched on finance, accounting, and legal a bit there. I imagine all of you have got accounting software, but how do you actually manage the accounting function in your business? If you're a one-man band or you've only got a small number of employees, it's probably going to be pretty simple. You probably use Xero or MYOB or something like that. You've probably got an accountant who handles your compliance, and maybe you engage a bookkeeper, or maybe it's provided by your accountant, or you just do it yourself. Easy, right? Like, it's a pretty straightforward function. But as you grow and the complexity around your numbers deepens, you need to make sure that you continue to upskill in this area. I'll give you an example. We had a client, they turned over almost 100 million. And when they met with us, they were still just using an outsourced bookkeeper and their accountant to do their tax returns. frankly, I was horrified. That business needs a really experienced CFO, somebody who can actually drive financial strategy in the business, somebody who can make recommendations even on how to manage some of the wealth that was coming in through that business so that capital was deployed appropriately. Okay, so a couple of ends of the spectrum here. You need to think about where you are on that spectrum and whether you've got the right people, the right tools, right systems, etc., for where you're at and fundamentally where you want to go. So hopefully giving you a bit of an overview here, right? Like, look at your business as if it's a revenue producing machine. You need to look at all the different components, understand how they fit and work together, and whether or not that vehicle will be fit for purpose to take you to that next stage of your life. But the more you can articulate this, the more you can explain it, the more you've got models and systems and process around it, the more your business is going to be worth, the easier it's going to be to sell, and ultimately the happier you're going to be, because frankly, businesses that are run like this are actually a lot more fun to run. You're not doing knee-jerk reactions and putting out fires all the time and just dealing with drama. Okay, so consider this the anti-drama sort of solution to your world. All right. So when you're, understand your model and you're thinking about then how to prepare it. So we've defined your business, right? It's a profit-producing machine. If it's not a profit-producing machine and you still want to sell today, then you need to think about how to best articulate the components that we've discussed so that you can present it in the most logical way. And if you've got a weird machine that's making noises and, it's just hard for buyers to understand, once again, it's going to be a challenge. So reach out if you're in a bit of a pickle with that. We can probably talk you through some stuff and how to at least pick out the top things that are going to make the biggest difference for you. Once you've got that definition, you feel confident that you can explain these aspects of your business. One of the key things you'll need to do is make sure that you've got all of the documentation and all of the assets in your business lined up and easily accessible, okay? Today's session is about how to prepare your business for sale, right? It's about being organized. It means that when you pull the trigger, which will be the next webinar, how to sell your business, you need to have your ducks lined up. You want to make sure your goal should be, once you've pulled that trigger, if you had a buyer walk in on the very first day offering you the kind of money you want, who's very excited to go through the process and acquire you, that there is nothing at your end that is going to slow them down. And if you were on the previous webinars, you would have heard me say this, but time kills deals. And if a buyer is asking you for things and you're disorganized and you can't produce them like that, then frankly, it actually, one, puts them off a little bit, and the longer they're waiting, the worse it gets. But two, it makes them start to question other things in your business. Like, oh, geez, if they can't put their hands on those basic requests or requirements, what else is wrong with their business? Like, how bad are some of the more complex issues, right? So you need to give some thought to all of the key elements that you're going to require should you find a buyer and ultimately end up in due diligence. So that model I've shown you on the screen, there's going to be, it's very intentional, right? It's the key buckets that people are going to be looking for, and they're going to be looking for all of the various assets and things that sit under those buckets to explain what you do, but prove what you're saying is true, okay? If you're expecting people to trust you, you may be disappointed. All right, so we've defined our business. We've defined all the various things that are going to verify and document our business. We've got all those various assets, all of the data that you need to present to people, and preferably you're going to be able to put it into an online data room. Now, data rooms are a funny thing. At the surface level, all it is an online folder that you can share access to, okay? Google Drive, Dropbox, any of those things can be used as a bit of a data room. We've used all of those things in the past, SharePoint today for some deals. Just keep in mind that the bigger your business is and the more complexity there is, the more likelihood that the buyers on the other side are going to have teams of advisors. And when you've got lots of people trying to access shared folders, things like Google Drive and all the rest of it can sometimes cause more problems than they're worth. So there are a bunch of other platforms out there for driving a due diligence process. It is a bit of a horses for courses thing, so because there are quite a lot of them. So if you want recommendations on maybe what platform would make sense for your business, just ping me a message and give me some context. Let me know where you're at in the process, and I can probably point you in the right direction. One little caveat too, some of the lawyers that we work with, and when I say work with, we refer them work through our clients. We don't have financial relationships with them. They don't pay us. But a lot of the lawyers that we work with actually have access to data rooms, so they can provide it as a service to you when you engage them for the legal aspect of your transaction. So if you can get it for free, why not, right? But yeah, reach out to me if you've got questions around data rooms and things like that. All right. We've defined our business. We know what it is. We know how we're going to talk about it. We know how we're going to present and what we're going to present to potential buyers. The next real question is actually, well, who are our buyers, right? How do we actually define that? And so I'm going to just stop sharing for a second because I think you've got the overview there nice and clearly. And I want to just spend a minute defining different types of buyers for you. It's perhaps another recap, but it bears explanation here. Typically speaking, there are three types of buyers that I come across out there and that you will come across if you're selling. And the relevance of these three buyers will depend on your business type and very much so the business size, okay? So the first one is lifestyle buyers. They're typically people who, when they look at your business, they probably like what you do. They like the business. They like the space or the industry it's in. Pretty much they kind of like the look of your life and would be happy to step in and kind of do it in their own way. Lifestyle buyers are, I find, applicable up to sale values of realistically probably about 2 to 3 million. You can go a bit higher than that if they're coming from a place with additional capital, but typically once you get to sort of 2 to 3 million, most of the lifestyle buyers tend to drop off. Now, if you've got a larger business, and a lot of people on this call probably do, you're going to be looking more at the financial buyers and ultimately the strategic acquirers. All right, but lifestyle, I don't want anyone on this call to underestimate the value of lifestyle buyers if you do have a smaller business. Lifestyle buyers can add a lot of value. They can be quite passionate about your business, and realistically, what you want, your goal when you go to market is to have as many interested buyers as you possibly can, willing to put in offers on your business to create the competitive tension you need to extract the best value and the best terms around that value. Okay, so competitive tension is great. Additional buyers provide that for you. And let's be honest, right? Like, options are a wonderful thing, right? If you've got one buyer putting something on the table, that you might feel a little bit sort of constrained or a little bit desperate, or geez, there's no alternatives here, and that's not a great place to negotiate from. So if you've got 3 or 4 offers on the table, you can kind of probably reject certain things with confidence. So multiple buyers is the message. Once you move beyond lifestyle buyers, we'll just touch on financial buyers. They are what they say, what they're called, right? They're looking for a return. Typically the ROI, when will I get my money back? You'll see them probably putting a little bit of a squeeze on multiples, because a 3-time multiple means they get their money back in 3 years. Now, a 33% return per annum is a pretty good return, but obviously it comes with risk. So some of them may be willing to pay higher depending on your business. Some of them, and frankly, a lot of them will probably try to pay lower depending on your business and the model. So financial buyers, driven by the money, driven by the returns. And the point of this is, not only are financial buyers, they are still very, very important in the process, but it's important for yourself to put yourself in their shoes and think about your business from an ROI perspective, right? Looking through the eyes of a buyer is always going to be a smart thing for you to do. But I'll give you an example. We had a client in the renewable energy space. He actually used a firm at the big end of town. He dropped over 100 grand on their process. It went nowhere. He came to us and said, look, can you help me? I just, things that don't work out. I don't know if this is achievable. He was told from a value perspective that he could get 10 times, a 10 multiple of his net profit And he was a little bit offended when I kind of just outright said, that's ridiculous and unachievable. And I had to sort of explain to him, I'm not trying to insult you or belittle your business. You've got a fantastic business, but whoever told you it was worth 10 times was kind of blowing smoke, because it wasn't realistic. It wasn't how businesses were trading in his market. And it turned into this big debate. He kept pushing me and pushing me on it. And then when I flipped it and I said, look, let me ask you this one question. If you were a buyer and you were buying this business, you were buying your own business, how many years would you be willing to invest before you want your money back? And the funny thing was, he goes, 3 years, tops. I said, okay, well, you're basically saying you're only willing to pay a multiple of 3 for your own business, but you're wanting someone else to pay a multiple of 10. Like, massive disconnect here, right? And so it might sound obvious, but a lot of people just don't look at their business from that perspective. This guy had a bit of an epiphany, and he realized the entire process he'd run before was a waste of time, and certainly made him reassess how he wanted to go about things in the future. So consider that angle, consider the ROI perspective with financial buyers. Of course, strategic acquirers, they're the third type of buyer. They are, in my view, the most important type of buyer. And they're the most important type of buyer because a strategic acquirer, by their very nature, are always looking at the 1 + 1 = 3 or more scenario, right? Your business might be worth $1 million in your hands, but in that buyer's hands, it might be worth 3 or 5 or 10 million, because they bring something special to the table that gives leverage and can grow it significantly. All right. Strategic acquirers, the way I typically explain it, is that they have the ability, but not necessarily the willingness, to pay more than what other buyers can and are able to pay. And it's all because of that formula, right? If you can demonstrate to that strategic buyer that they're going to pay $1 million more than these other guys, but they'll get their money back in a shorter period of time than those other guys, well, that's still a pretty good argument, right? So you need to think about those strategic levers in your business and how they would work. Now, I'm going to launch another quick poll, just in terms of your approach to selling the business. One of the things I'm keen to know, if you're going to sell your business, which of the following best reflects your approach? And it's really interesting, right? I think a lot of people out there have got different views. There's no right or wrong from my perspective. We're here to help you regardless of which approach you want to take. But how confident are you that you could just sell your business? Would you know what to do? Like, has some of the stuff I've already spoken about in terms of preparing your business for sale, does that all make sense to you? Am I just telling you how to suck eggs here because it's super obvious? Or are you feeling or recognizing that there's maybe a lot below the surface that, geez, that would be good to get some help with? So the 3 options here are, and by the way, this is one of those questions you might want to widen your screen on because the wording might be cut off. But first option is DIY. You're comfortable doing it all yourself. Option 2 is done with you. In other words, you'd like some support. You want some tools, tips, templates, access to databases. You want stuff. You're happy to do it yourself. You're confident you can present your own business case. You're confident you can negotiate the right sale. If possible, you maybe be able to dial into an advisor every now and again to get some advice, but pretty much you're confident to drive most of the effort and outcomes yourself. And of course, the final one is done for you. So basically, hand it over to somebody who's a professional advisor who will run the process for you. They'll still need your involvement, by the way, but they take the heavy lifting and provide a buffer between you and the market so that you can keep focusing on what you need to do. So they're the 3 different options. Love your feedback. I think it's an interesting perspective. And by the way, once again, there's no right or wrong about how you go about these things. It's how confident you feel in that scenario, and whether you're willing to invest the time and effort, et cetera, to take certain functions on yourself as opposed to getting someone else to do it. Okay, so very quickly on those results. 7% comfortable to do DIY, about 46% saying done with you, and 46% are saying broker. So that's really interesting. And I think good on you. If you're comfortable with the done with you approach, little hint here, I might have something that I can share with you down the track. Stay tuned. There's probably some stuff you'll be wanting to see. So very good. All right, I'm going to end that poll. Thank you for your feedback on that. And I'm going to now tune further into this discussion around buyers. I know we're short on time here, so this last point is one of my key ones before we start to wrap up. And that is, you know, we've defined the three buyers, right? Lifestyle buyers, financial buyers, strategic acquirers, or strategic buyers. We all now probably can agree that strategic buyers is where it's at if you want to drive the best outcome for yourself. We won't say no to a financial buyer giving you the right number, but let's just focus on strategic acquirers for a moment. You need to ask yourself two core questions. How do I define a strategic acquirer in my business? Like, what does that look like? And how do I actually go and find, once I know what they look like, how do I go find them, right? Where are those companies? Who are they? And by the way, who within those companies are the people I should be talking to? Now, this is the sort of stuff that a really good advisor should be able to do for you. They should be able to provide a list of companies and the people in those companies and say, these are who we want to go target, and you can review that list and approve it or reject individual names if you want. But you're basically ticking off on a game plan. What I'm going to show you how to do now is how to define and do this yourself if you need to. Okay. All right, I'm going to share my screen again. Here with me, here we go. So this is my little market map, or an example of it. Pretty straightforward diagram. Everyone recognizes the old XY diagram. You know, your Y or vertical axis is what I typically call your vertical industry chain, right? And of course, the bullseye is you. You're in the middle. Of course, you're in the middle of your own world and your own environment, your own market. So vertical industry chain means, do you have suppliers? Do you, and of course, above you, and of course, you'll have customers below you. I'm going to use an example that is just easy to understand. Of course, that vertical chain is different for everybody. If you're a professional services company, you probably don't have any real suppliers other than the people who provide you a bit of software and a few different things. The example I'm going to give you is, let's say for a moment, you sell furniture. Now, if you sell furniture, in the up chain, there is raw materials. There's people who chop trees and process lumber and blah, 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 blah. And it goes to manufacturers, and there's probably different styles of manufacturers. There's certain manufacturers, then there's value-add manufacturers. Then there could be a global wholesaler, distributor. They sell to you. You then sell onwards to other wholesalers, perhaps retailers, and ultimately even maybe some end-user customers, right? That's your vertical industry chain. Everybody in that chain could have a strategic reason or lever to want to acquire your company, right? Suppliers want to get closer to the customer. People below you in that chain want to get further up the chain to increase margin. Lots of different reasons there. On the x-axis, or the flat horizontal axis, is potentially competitors, right? Now, out to the left, you might have certain competitors. Out to the right, you might have other competitors. Probably other way around for you looking at me, but out to your left, there might be people who compete on certain products or even services, if that's your thing. Out to the right, it might be people who compete in certain geographic regions as you, or other ways of competing, right? Your competitors, you need to think about how you define your competitors. Very rarely, by the way, do I ever find anybody who sits right over the top of our clients, as in they do exactly what you do, where you do it, how you do it, etc. If you do have that case, that's probably a really good thing to think about how you position your business, and talk to me about that later. Think on that three-dimensional axis now. The Z-axis is where you find complementary buyers. Now, what do I mean by complementary? Well, let's say I sell tables, you sell chairs. We don't buy and sell from each other in that vertical chain. We're not really competing with each other, but the connection's pretty damn obvious, right? Like, your customers are probably my customers. When they're buying from you, they're probably going through a similar process to buy from me anyway. If we brought our businesses together, boom, 1 + 1 = 3. There's an enormous amount of savings to be had. There's better market reach. There's, you know, a lot of advantage. So this model, and I'm moving quickly here because I'm cognizant of time and I want to finish on time for everybody. This market mapping model will help you start to define who could be a strategic acquirer for you. Okay. Once you start to define those particular characteristics, like what do they do? What industry are they in? How big are they? You might define that by revenue or other metrics that you can see in the market. Define those, what a good strategic acquirer looks like, and then hit the internet, hit various platforms, do what you need to do to research and come up with a list of prospects. Okay. Now, what I will say, a lot of my clients come and they say, look, I've already done that. I've got a list of 5 or 6 strategic acquirers. I had one the other day. He had a list of 47 strategic acquirers. When I took his metrics and I handed it over to our research team, we came up with a list of 300. Might sound like a lot, but the metrics he was using to measure a good strategic acquirer was replicated. And I think when we handed that list over, I think he struck off about 3 or 4 and just said, I know those companies, they're not appropriate, but everyone else, wow, didn't realize there was that much potential out there. So define the strategic acquirer, go out and create your list. And by the way, if you're saying that sounds like a lot of work, yes, it is. It is a lot of work. There's no escaping that. There's a lot of work. You've either got to be willing and know how to do it yourself, or you've got to get someone else to do it, but you can do it. You should be able to define your market. And if you've got the time, then you can sit down and research these things. Once you've got your list of companies, you then need to find the people in those companies that you need to be speaking to, including contact details, and structure your campaign. Now, one of the things that I'm skipping over quite lightly today because we don't have a lot of time, you do need to build your marketing assets before you pull the trigger on a campaign. Building an information memorandum is going to be critical to that. Like, that's the key document that you're going to send to prospective buyers to get them interested in the deal. Now, I get lots of different sort of people saying to me, well, different views on IMs. IM, short for information memorandum. Some say, you only need to throw a few financials in. Some people don't care too much about whether it looks pretty or not. Sure, I think in all cases, like, you could probably make an argument for these things. But what I want you to take away from this discussion is you only get one chance to make a first impression. One. It's your choice about what you want that impression to be. For me, I want to put my best foot forward. I want to put, for my client, our best foot forward. I want people to look at that information memorandum and go, wow, this looks really interesting. This is worth us taking another step in this process. And if you can do that, then it's done its job, right? Then it's up to you to get on the calls and have the discussions and do all the rest of that stuff, which we'll touch on more in the next webinar in actually how to sell your business, okay? Marketing assets, there is more to it. Reach out. We actually, by the way, have a checklist that we are willing to share. So I'll show you in a moment how to go about doing that. So look, we are coming into the close of the webinar at the moment. One of the other things that we will need to touch on in the next webinar will be how else to find buyers. So we've talked about defining and identifying strategic acquirers and developing an outbound, very active kind of campaign to go and speak to them. The other one is advertising. There are an enormous number of platforms and different ways you can sort of put ads or posts on there to attract some buyers. Typically speaking, you get a lot of tire kickers on those platforms. You do also get some very good buyers out of there, but you need to determine whether that's a right fit for your business or not. I can touch a bit more on that later. Of course, if you've got questions, reach out. So just to kind of wrap up, if there are any next steps here, really all I want to do is make sure I'm adding value for you guys. So there's a couple of things that we can do. By all means, book a call. It's probably the easiest thing you can do. If you whip out your phone and you scan that QR code, it takes you straight to the page to be able to book a call in. You can jump on a call with myself, one of the people in the team. If you give us a little bit of context, we'll probably even try to match you with the best person to answer your questions. And that might not be me, by the way. So particularly if you've got industry-specific things you want to know about. 2, connect with me on LinkedIn. If you're on this call and we're not connected on LinkedIn, like, that's a bit crazy. Shoot me a connection. Please just include a little note saying, saw you on the webinar. Even if you just put the one word and wrote webinar, I would get it and I'd be happy to connect with you, okay? So shoot me a connection request. We share a lot of stuff via LinkedIn. It's free, right? So, might as well tap into it. Finally, join us for the next, almost finally, join us for the next webinar. It's going to be towards the end of April. How to sell my business without a broker. I'm going to get into the nitty-gritty of how to run this process, how to protect yourself, how to do all those key things. And of course, we've got the Buy, Grow, Sell podcast. Now, I do have one final question if you're still with us, and it looks like we still have the bulk of people, so thank you for hanging around. I would love to ask you one final question, and that will help me shape some of the content for the next webinar. So I'm going to stop sharing very quickly. It is my final poll question, and that is the business sale challenges. Which of the following would you find most challenging out of these options? Creating a detailed information memorandum and other marketing materials, defining the target market and knowing where to find those buyers, preparing and managing the outbound campaign. In other words, how do you actually get in contact with these people and handle those conversations? So there's a few answers there. Any of your feedback would be super appreciated because it'll give me guidance on what to focus on in our next talk. And, really, once again, I just want to add as much value to you as I possibly can. So appreciate that feedback. While you're completing that, if you haven't already seen the podcast, Buy, Grow, Sell at buygrowsell.com, go and check it out. Not trying to toot our own horn here, but I actually think it's a pretty good podcast. And not because it's me hosting it, it's because the guests we have are phenomenal people. They have amazing stories. There are so many obstacles and problems that we unpack when they were selling their businesses. Like, it is a treasure trove if you are going to sell your company in the next anytime, frankly. But lots of different examples, how do earnouts work, how the different approaches, what happened to these different people, what were the problems, what did they regret, what would they do differently? There's nothing like hearing the story of those who have been there before. And I just think if you check that out, I'm sure you'll find a couple of episodes that relate. If you want our guidance on maybe some episodes that'll be more relevant to you, ping us a message. Tell me, hey, Simon, I'm in this industry and my business is approximately this size and I'm thinking about selling in a couple of years or whatever. If you've got specific questions, I'll try to find a couple of episodes that relate to you. All right. Looks like that's finished. Quick poll results on that. We're done, but it looks like, geez, it's almost an even split here across those various different factors, with the lowest one being managing confidentiality. So most people are pretty confident in that space. That's good. One of the biggest questions I get, by the way. So very good. I'll end that poll. Thank you all once again for joining us on this webinar, and it has been a pleasure to chat to you. I hope you've gotten some value out of it. I will share my screen one final time in case you missed those links. Scan the code if you want to book a call. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Join us for the next webinar because I'm going to punch even more value into that hour than I have probably in any of the others. And of course, check out the podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got a lot of value. Thanks for joining us and see you on the next call.